President Trump has declared a one-month delay in implementing the 25% tariffs on various Canadian imports, now scheduled to take effect on April 2nd. This decision follows discussions with Canadian officials and concerns raised by multiple industries. In response, Canadian Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc announced that Canada would also postpone its planned second wave of retaliatory tariffs, worth $125 billion, until April 7th. However, the initial tariffs, which target $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, will remain in force. Among the many responses from different provinces, British Columbia's stance is particularly noteworthy, due to its strategic position as a key connection between the U.S. mainland and Alaska. British Columbia is preparing to introduce legislation that would authorize the province to impose tolls on commercial vehicles traveling to Alaska in reaction to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. According to BC Premier David Eby, this action is intended to send a strong message to the president, as well as to Alaska's Republican congressional representatives and the state's Republican governor. The proposed legislation would also mandate that low-carbon fuel additives for gasoline and diesel be produced domestically in Canada. Additionally, it would grant British Columbia new powers to eliminate internal trade barriers as the country works toward reducing its reliance on the U.S. Despite Trump's partial rollback of tariffs affecting North American trade partners, Eby stressed that Canada should maintain its countermeasures. He declared that Canada would not tolerate continuous threats and uncertainty, stating, "We are standing up for Canadians. This conduct is unacceptable, and we are making it clear to the U.S. just how frustrated we are. We must not back down until the president completely removes this threat." Eby clarified that he would not immediately enforce the tolls, and that the number of affected trucks would be relatively small. However, the move highlights the growing tension between historically close allies as Canada increases pressure on Trump to abandon his tariff strategy. The White House has initiated a trade war we never wanted, and we must respond decisively, Eby asserted. He further stated that these initial actions are only the beginning, and additional measures would be introduced in the coming weeks to protect Canada's economy from ongoing economic aggression. British Columbia is set to introduce tariff response legislation in the near future, equipping the province with new mechanisms to protect jobs, businesses, and respond swiftly to economic challenges arising from Trump's trade policies. The proposed measures include dismantling interprovincial trade barriers to bolster British Columbia's internal economy, requiring that low-carbon fuel additives for gasoline and diesel be sourced within Canada, and implementing tolls or fees on U.S. commercial vehicles using BC infrastructure to reach Alaska. Eby criticized the U.S. administration's tariffs as a damaging miscalculation that negatively impacts families and businesses on both sides of the border. "Our government will fight for British Columbians every step of the way, and we are keeping all options on the table," he emphasized. As an immediate action, the province has ordered the BC Liquor Distribution Branch to cease purchasing American liquor from Republican-controlled states, leading to the removal of those brands from public liquor store shelves. Additionally, BC government agencies and Crown corporations have been directed to prioritize Canadian goods and services. These actions align with a broader national strategy known as the Team Canada approach, which includes the federal government's 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of U.S. imports, as well as countermeasures from other provinces and territories aimed at reducing dependence on U.S. trade. British Columbia is aggressively exploring alternative markets and fast-tracking approvals for significant investment projects. The initial wave, valued at $20 billion, is expected to generate around 8,000 jobs, with particular benefits for rural and remote communities. To ensure a well-coordinated and effective response, Premier Eby has formed a Trade and Economic Security Task Force, which brings together business leaders, labor representatives, and Indigenous community members. Additionally, a dedicated task force on agriculture and the food economy has been established to protect BC's food supply, while a BC Softwood Advisory Council is working on diplomatic and trade strategies to defend the province's interests in the ongoing softwood lumber dispute. A newly created cabinet committee will oversee the government's comprehensive response. With these measures, British Columbia is taking decisive steps to safeguard its economy, workforce, and businesses from the repercussions of U.S. tariffs, while enhancing trade and economic resilience for the future. Canada plays a vital role in connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States, as Alaska is a geographical exclave, meaning it is not directly linked to the contiguous U.S. by land. The vast Canadian territory between Alaska and the mainland U.S. serves as an essential transit region for travel, trade, and infrastructure. One of the most crucial links between Alaska and the lower 48 states is the Alaska Highway, also known as the Alcan Highway. This key roadway begins in Dawson Creek, British Columbia, and extends to Delta Junction, Alaska. Originally constructed during World War II to provide a secure supply route for military operations, the highway remains the primary overland route connecting Alaska to the rest of the U.S. Despite modernization over the decades, much of the route still passes through remote and rugged terrain, requiring travelers to drive through several hundred miles of Canadian land before reaching Alaska. Beyond road transport, air travel also heavily depends on Canada's geographical position. Numerous flights between Alaska and other U.S. states pass through Canadian airspace, with some even making stops in Canadian cities. Canada's air traffic control systems are instrumental in managing the movement of aircraft traveling between Alaska and various destinations across the United States. Close cooperation between American and Canadian aviation authorities ensures the smooth operation of these air routes. Trade and commerce further highlight Canada's role in linking Alaska with the rest of the U.S. While there is no direct railway connecting Alaska to the lower 48 states, rail and freight services frequently transport goods through Canada. The Port of Vancouver in British Columbia serves as a major transit hub for shipments moving to and from Alaska. Many essential supplies, including food, fuel, and construction materials, are transported via Canadian ports and railways before reaching their final destinations in Alaska. For those traveling by car or truck between Alaska and the contiguous U.S., crossing the Canadian border is unavoidable. The United States and Canada maintain a strong diplomatic relationship, which facilitates relatively smooth border crossings for trade, tourism, and personal travel. However, travelers must comply with Canadian customs and immigration regulations, and ensure they have the necessary documentation before transiting through the country. Another significant aspect of Alaska's connection to the rest of the U.S. through Canada is energy infrastructure. Alaska is rich in natural resources, particularly oil and natural gas, and Canada provides essential transit routes for these resources to reach both American and global markets. Pipelines and shipping routes enable the movement of Alaskan energy products through Canada, supporting the U.S. economy and global energy demands. Alaska maintains a deep economic and logistical relationship with Canada, playing a crucial role in trade, transportation, and connectivity. The exchange of goods between Alaska and Canada is substantial, with over $1 billion in trade occurring annually. Of this, approximately $596 million is exported from Alaska to Canada, while $753 million worth of goods are imported into Alaska from Canada. This trade is vital for industries such as energy, seafood, and manufacturing, ensuring a steady flow of essential commodities between the two regions. In addition to transportation via land, marine shipping plays a crucial role in the movement of both goods and people between Alaska and Canada. The Inside Passage, a scenic and strategically significant coastal waterway, serves as a key link between southeastern Alaska and British Columbia. This route is extensively used for commercial shipping, tourism, and passenger transport. Regular ferry services, including those operated by the Alaska Marine Highway System and BC Ferries, support trade and connectivity between Alaskan and Canadian coastal communities. These ferry operations not only strengthen commerce, but also provide an essential transportation lifeline for residents, particularly those in remote areas where road access is either limited or unavailable. Let's take a brief moment here. If you're enjoying this video so far, we'd greatly appreciate your support. Clicking the like button helps extend our reach, while sharing your thoughts or feedback in the comments has an even greater impact. Thank you for watching. Now let's get back into it. Premier Tim Houston strongly criticized the tariffs, calling Trump's approach reckless and short-sighted. In response, Nova Scotia has introduced several countermeasures, including prohibiting American businesses from bidding on provincial government contracts, reassessing existing agreements, doubling toll fees for U.S. commercial trucks on the Cobequid Pass, removing American-made alcoholic beverages from Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation stores, and allocating a contingency fund in the 2025 to 2026 budget to mitigate the economic impact of the tariffs. Beyond these immediate steps, Houston stressed the importance of reinforcing domestic trade, dismantling internal trade barriers within Canada, and expanding opportunities in global markets. He assured the people of Nova Scotia that his administration would continue to safeguard their interests and urged them to actively support Canadian businesses. Premier Danielle Smith condemned the tariffs as an unjustifiable economic assault, warning that they would have detrimental consequences for both countries by driving up costs and causing job losses. While backing the federal government's countermeasures, she announced that Alberta would reveal its own set of retaliatory measures within the next 24 hours. Smith also called for national solidarity, urging all provinces to remove internal trade restrictions and prioritize the advancement of key resource projects, including pipelines and liquefied natural gas (LNG) facilities. Additionally, she highlighted the necessity for Canada to strengthen international trade partnerships and increase national defense investments in response to an increasingly unpredictable global landscape. Premier Wab Kinew moved swiftly to enforce retaliatory actions by directing the removal of all American alcoholic products from Manitoba liquor marts, reinforcing the province's stance against the tariffs. Meanwhile, Newfoundland and Labrador's Premier, Andrew Furey, labeled the tariffs illegal and unjust, taking decisive action by pulling U.S. products from Newfoundland and Labrador Liquor Corporation shelves, suspending procurement of American goods and services, and intensifying efforts to expand market access beyond the U.S., particularly in Europe. Furey also announced the formation of a roundtable on Canada-U.S. trade relations to formulate further strategies. He urged Canadians to remain united, emphasizing that the nation's identity, values, and sovereignty would guide it through this economic dispute. Canada is accelerating efforts to lessen its dependence on the U.S. market, aiming to reduce vulnerability to trade conflicts. By leveraging existing free trade agreements such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, Ottawa is actively encouraging businesses to shift their exports toward Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The government is also offering financial support and grants to assist industries in adapting to new trade realities. Several provinces are prioritizing market diversification efforts, with British Columbia, for instance, fast-tracking investment projects and seeking international customers, while Atlantic provinces are working to expand seafood exports to European markets. Although geographic proximity and a long-standing trade relationship make the U.S. a natural economic partner, the ongoing tariff threats have intensified Canada's determination to seek alternatives. The country already benefits from preferential trade agreements with the European Union, multiple Asia-Pacific nations, and various Latin American economies. Officials are actively pushing companies to utilize these agreements as a way to compensate for potential losses in the U.S. market. There is hope that increased trade with nations such as Japan and Europe will help offset any economic shortfalls. Ongoing discussions with India and other emerging economies may further open up new opportunities. Canada is also working to strengthen its trade ties with Mexico and other CPTPP member nations, aiming to establish a more expansive free trade network that minimizes reliance on the U.S. Canadian manufacturers and agricultural producers are adjusting to these changes by reallocating resources, securing alternative suppliers, and identifying new export routes. Retailers are also actively replacing American goods with locally produced or internationally sourced alternatives. While this transition will take time, the current tariffs have injected a sense of urgency into Canada's trade diversification strategy. Trade tensions between the United States and Canada are not new, as both countries have endured numerous economic disputes over the years. One of the longest-standing and most contentious trade conflicts is the softwood lumber dispute, which began in 1982 and continues to this day. The U.S. lumber industry has long accused Canada of providing unfair subsidies, leading to the imposition of countervailing duties, while Canada staunchly refutes these allegations. This ongoing dispute has resulted in multiple rounds of tariffs, legal battles, and temporary agreements, making it one of the most persistent trade conflicts in the history of U.S.-Canada relations. Other long-standing trade disputes include conflicts over Canadian dairy supply management, which has restricted American market access, as well as disagreements over country of origin labeling requirements for meat products, restrictions that were ultimately overturned following a challenge at the World Trade Organization, WTO. Past U.S. administrations have periodically imposed tariffs on Canadian products, often leading to retaliatory measures and subsequent compromises. In 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act dramatically raised U.S. duties on thousands of imported goods. As America's top trading partner at the time, Canada swiftly retaliated by increasing tariffs on 16 categories of U.S. goods. The result was mutual economic harm and a significant decline in trade. In 1971, President Nixon temporarily imposed a 10% surcharge on imports, including Canadian goods, during a financial crisis straining relations until a monetary agreement led to its removal within months. Similarly, in 2002, President George W. Bush introduced steel tariffs of up to 30% on foreign imports, though Canada and Mexico were exempted under NAFTA. These steel tariffs were eventually withdrawn following global retaliation threats and an unfavorable WTO ruling. The incident demonstrated that broad U.S. tariffs often encounter fierce international resistance. The period between 2018 and 2019, under President Trump, saw major tariffs placed on steel and aluminum under the guise of national security concerns. Canada responded with reciprocal tariffs on U.S. steel, aluminum, and several politically sensitive goods. After about a year of economic strain, the U.S. lifted these metal tariffs in exchange for certain concessions under the updated U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. This episode reinforced the importance of a united response, as Canada's federal government, provinces, and industry groups worked collectively to pressure American counterparts into a resolution. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's firm stance in 2018, declaring that Canada will not be pushed around, set a precedent that has shaped the country's current approach to trade conflicts. President Trump's sweeping tariffs raise serious legal concerns under international trade laws. Canada argues that these tariffs directly violate both the letter and the intent of the USMCA, which eliminated duties on most North American goods. Unlike specific trade disagreements over individual provisions, these blanket tariffs impose a 25% duty on Canadian imports across the board, which Canada believes is a direct violation of fundamental free trade principles. Furthermore, the measures likely breach key WTO regulations concerning most favored nation treatment and bound tariff rates, unless justified under a national security exemption. The U.S. administration is expected to justify the tariffs under national security provisions within existing trade agreements. President Trump has previously declared a national emergency regarding fentanyl trafficking, attempting to link Canada to the crisis and arguing that tariffs are necessary as leverage to combat cross-border smuggling. However, using a public health or security rationale to justify widespread tariffs on nearly all imports is unprecedented. Past WTO rulings have largely dismissed broad claims of national security concerns as justification for trade restrictions. Canada has multiple legal avenues to challenge these tariffs, including invoking the USMCA's dispute resolution mechanisms, which involve consultations and the possibility of a panel ruling. If the U.S. refuses to withdraw the tariffs despite an unfavorable ruling, Canada would be permitted to impose countermeasures. However, legal proceedings typically take over a year to conclude. In the meantime, Canada has already implemented immediate retaliatory tariffs. The country may also pursue parallel complaints through the WTO, though enforcing a ruling remains difficult if the U.S. fails to comply. Beyond formal legal disputes, Canada can activate provisions within the USMCA to suspend certain trade concessions. Domestic court challenges within the U.S. could also be explored, though American courts tend to grant the president significant authority on trade matters when national emergencies are declared. In practice, a resolution is more likely to emerge from negotiations and diplomatic pressure rather than through legal victories alone. That's all for today's video. We truly appreciate you tuning in. If you found this content informative or engaging, please show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your engagement is invaluable to us.